Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a future where pushing the boundaries of human health, maybe even lifespan itself, isn't just sci-fi talk.
Right, or something only available if you're, facing the absolute end.
Exactly. What if access to really cutting-edge experimental treatments opened up beyond the critically ill, like potentially to, well, anyone?
And that future, or at least a version of it, isn't hypothetical anymore. We're seeing some very real steps happening right now in one particular place.
That's what we're diving into today, a pretty significant development out of Montana, a new law that seems set to radically change access to experimental medicine, specifically focusing on longevity.
Mm-hmm. And our source for this deep dive, we're working from excerpts of a document discussing this very law, Montana's SB535.
So our mission here is to break down what this law actually says, based on that source.
Yeah.
Who does it affect? What are the potential ripple effects for healthcare, maybe even society?
And we'll also look at how similar ideas, though maybe with different goals, are popping up elsewhere. The source mentions Korea specifically, all based strictly on the information we have in front of us.
Okay, so to really get why Montana's move is such a big deal, we need a baseline. Let's talk right to try laws. You've probably heard of them.
Yeah, they're pretty common across the U.S. now, states and federal.
And traditionally, they were quite specific, quite narrow, really. They were for patients, only patients with terminal illnesses or really severe life-threatening conditions.
People who'd basically run out of options, all approved treatments, tried, nothing worked.
Right. So right to try was like a last resort pathway. Access experimental stuff still in trials, not fully FDA approved yet. It came from a place of compassion, really.
But what happens when you take that basic idea, access to the experimental, and you just stretch the eligibility way beyond that group?
And that's exactly where Montana's SB535 comes in. The course basically calls it a game changer.
It feels like one.
It really does. The core change is huge. SB535 takes, right, to try and, it expands it massively. It's not just for the terminally ill anymore. It explicitly allows healthy people access.
Healthy people.
Healthy people. And the source specifically calls out experimental longevity treatments as being covered. This isn't just talk either. The bill was signed into law May 12, 2025. It's done.
Wow. Okay, so let's dig into the specifics then, based on the source doc. How does this actually work on the ground?
Well, first, as you said, the eligibility. That's the headline. It shifts from the critically ill to, well, the general healthy population. That's a fundamental departure.
A massive shift. And how do people access these treatments? Is it just anywhere?
No, the law sets up a system. Medical facilities in Montana can apply to become licensed experimental treatment centers, so specific places authorized by the state.
Okay, so designated centers. That provides some structure, I suppose.
Right. And if you, the patient, want to use one of these centers, there are requirements. Written consent is mandatory.
Which you'd expect.
Sure, but the source says this consent has to be really detailed and needs to list any approved alternative treatments, even if you're healthy, which kind of implies you're targeting aging itself, maybe?
Interesting implication.
And crucially, the consent must clearly explain the worst possible outcomes. Total transparency about the risks involved.
Which makes sense. With experimental stuff, especially for something complex like aging, the unknowns are significant. You need to spell out potential severe side effects, everything.
Absolutely. But there's another detail about these centers the source mentions, kind of a social responsibility thing.
Oh.
What's that? Apparently, these centers have to contribute 2% of their annual net profit.
2%? Towards what?
Towards providing free treatment for low-income patients or supporting an insurance premium account. It's like built into the law.
That is unusual, embedding a kind of social giveback directly into the business model of these potentially profitable centers. Interesting.
So zooming out, what's Montana's big idea here? Why do this?
Well, the source is pretty explicit. Montana wants to be a leader, a front runner in life extension therapies. It's strategic.
So it's not just about access, it's about becoming the place for this stuff,
Yeah.
building an industry.
Exactly. Economic development, scientific leadership, the whole package. The source notes other states have similar laws, but means the traditional right to try ones.
Right, which are much narrower.
Much narrower. Montana's scope, allowing healthy people in, is what makes it really different according to the source. They're carving out new ground.
And the source suggests this model could spread.
Mm.
Other states might follow.
It mentions that possibility, yeah. That this needs ongoing attention because it might not stay just in Montana. But, and this is really important, the source strongly emphasizes the caveats.
We absolutely have to talk about those. The source is clear. These treatments, the ones healthy people could get, they're unproven.
totally unproven for effectiveness, especially long-term for longevity. They're experimental for a reason we don't have solid data.
And connected to that is the risk, potential side effects.
Huge concern. You're tinkering with biology, with aging processes. The risks could be substantial, and many are probably unknown right now. We lack that long-term safety data, particularly for healthy people.
Yeah, it's not like treating a terminal illness where the risk-benefit calculation is different.
Precisely. And the source also flags the broader uncertainty. Will this Montana model actually catch on elsewhere? Other states, other countries? Still a big question mark.
Okay, so given all the big changes, the centers, the risks, Montana's ambition, why does this really matter? What are the big takeaways here from the source?
Well, despite the risks, the source points to potentially big opportunities. One is just dramatically increasing access to experimental options by opening the door wider.
More people could potentially try things sooner.
Maybe. And perhaps more significantly for the field, it could really boost interest, funding, research and life extension, creates a legal and potentially economic space for it.
The source mentions opportunities for researchers, doctors, biotech companies, basically anyone in that life extension space. Montana is trying to build an ecosystem.
That's the idea described. And then there's this really profound claim the source makes
Yeah.
that this law marks the serious start of experiments that could fundamentally change how we even define human lifespan.
Wow. Okay. Pause on that.
Yeah.
Not just adding a few years, but changing the definition itself.
Yeah.
That's quite a statement linked to one state law.
It is. It suggests the potential for something truly transformative stemming from this legislative shift. Which brings us to the next point. Is this kind of thinking happening elsewhere?
Right, because the source connects this to a proposal in Korea.
Exactly. And here, the source shifts the framing a bit. It looks at Montana's law not just as healthcare access, but as an industrial platform.
Using healthcare innovation to drive regional economy and growth.
Precisely. And that framing connects directly to the Korean proposal for regional precision medicine free zones.
Okay, so what's the parallel?
The source draws a clear line. Like Montana allowing healthy folks access to experimental stuff, precision medicine, anti-aging, genomics, regenerative medicine. The Korean idea is about similar practical application and access to innovative tech, but within specific regional zones.
So, similar goal of accessing cutting-edge therapies, maybe longevity-related, but in Korea, it seems really strongly linked to fixing a regional imbalance.
Very much so. The source talks about the expected benefits of this regulatory flexibility in Korea, attracting medtech companies, boosting medical tourism, especially high-income individuals, stimulating local economies through healthcare.
And it's aimed at a specific Korean problem mentioned in the source.
Yeah, this heavy concentration of healthcare resources, hospitals, doctors, tech, all in the capital, Seoul. Meanwhile, hospitals in other regions are struggling.
So the free zones are meant to decentralize, bring some of that innovation and economic activity out to other areas.
That's the concept.
Yeah.
Create these zones with flexible regulations, kind of like Montana's approach, and transform rural or regional hospitals.
Transform them how?
From just basic treatment centers into innovation hubs, focused on precision medicine, anti-aging, digital health, centers for applying research and offering advanced care.
So it's pitched as a way to tackle multiple problems at once.
Exactly. The source frames it as one strategy hitting 3 targets: loosening up restrictive medical regulations, building infrastructure for Korea's aging society, and boosting the local bioindustry outside the capital. It's pretty ambitious.
And what results do they anticipate, according to the source?
Several things. Easing that healthcare concentration in Seoul, better preparing for the aging population challenge, attracting companies and talent like young doctors, researchers to these regions.
Pulling them away from the capital.
Potentially. And maybe even lowering long-term healthcare costs through better prediction and prevention via precision medicine.
Okay, so when you put Montana and this Korean proposal side by side, what pattern emerges from the source material?
You see this clear trend, maybe a global one starting, towards widening access to experimental therapies, especially in areas like longevity, anti-aging, precision medicine.
And it's not just about patient rights anymore, is it? It's being explicitly linked to economic strategy.
Absolutely. In Montana and proposed in Korea, it's seen as an engine for economic growth, innovation, regional development. Healthcare policy meets industrial strategy.
But we have to circle back one last time to the caution in the source.
Crucial. These are still experimental. Effectiveness, especially for longevity in healthy people, is unproven. Side effects are a real and sometimes unknown risk. That uncertainty is fundamental here.
Right. So maybe the thought to leave everyone with, based on all this from the source, is what does it really mean when access to unproven experimental treatments starts moving beyond the terminally ill?
Yeah, what are the implications for our healthcare systems, for regional economies, but maybe even more deeply for how we think about aging, how we pursue longer lives, maybe even how we define what a normal lifespan is?
It's a huge shift Montana is actually doing, and others are clearly considering. It really feels like we're just starting to grapple with what this future might look like.